Our breakfast arrived after a few minutes. The tea was hot, and the sandwich smelled delicious. I took a sip of tea and said, "This is exactly what I needed." Arjun laughed and said, "I knew you were hungry." We continued talking while eating our breakfast. I asked him, "What are you going to do after shopping?" He said, "I have to finish some work at home." I asked, "What kind of work?" He replied, "I need to clean my room and organize my books." I laughed and said, "That sounds like a lot of work." Arjun said, "It is not difficult, but I keep delaying it." I nodded and said, "I understand. I also delay many things." He asked, "Like what?" I replied, "Like cleaning my study table." We both started laughing. After finishing our breakfast, we paid the shopkeeper and started walking towards the market. The market was not very far from the shop. We decided to walk instead of taking a vehicle. The weather was pleasant, and there was a cool breeze. While walking, we talked about our plans for the weekend. Arjun asked, "What are you doing this weekend?" I replied, "I am not sure yet." He said, "Maybe we can watch a movie." I thought for a moment and said, "That sounds like a good idea." Then I asked, "Which movie do you want to watch?" Arjun said, "I have not decided yet." I laughed and replied, "Then we have a problem." He asked, "What problem?" I said, "We have a plan, but we do not know what we are going to watch." Arjun laughed and said, "We will decide later." Just then, we reached a busy road. There was a lot of traffic, so we stopped and waited before crossing. The road was very busy that morning. Cars, bikes, and buses were moving in every direction. We waited patiently for a few minutes. Arjun looked at the traffic and said, "This road is always busy in the morning." I replied, "Yes, especially when people are going to work and school." Finally, the traffic became lighter. We carefully crossed the road and continued walking. On the way, we saw a small bakery. The smell of fresh bread came from inside. I stopped and said, "That smells amazing." Arjun looked at me and said, "Are you hungry again?" I laughed and replied, "No, I'm just looking." Arjun smiled and said, "You said the same thing before breakfast." I replied, "That is not true." He laughed and said, "Okay, I believe you." After a few minutes, we finally reached the market. The market was crowded, but there were many shops. We first entered a stationery shop. Arjun looked around and started searching for a notebook. He picked up one notebook and asked the shopkeeper, "How much is this?" The shopkeeper replied, "It costs 100 rupees. Arjun looked at the notebook and said, "That is a little expensive." The shopkeeper smiled and said, "It is a good quality notebook." Arjun looked at me and whispered, "I think I can find a cheaper one." I laughed and said, "You should ask for a discount." Arjun looked at the shopkeeper and asked, "Can you give us a small discount?" The shopkeeper thought for a moment and said, "Okay, I can reduce the price a little." Arjun smiled and said, "Thank you." Then I found a notebook that I liked. I asked, "How much is this one?" The shopkeeper told me the price. I looked at Arjun and said, "This one is perfect for me."